Hi there. In this video I'm going to take a look at the various ways you can implement a stop loss within Fairbot. We'll look at the manual methods as well as the corresponding automated methods. There is a direct correlation between them, although there are subtle differences with what you can do. So first of all, let's just stick in a bet, just back anything. So there we have backed manor bank. Now, the manual method for doing that is we can either trade out Manor Bank individually by clicking on here or clicking up the green up all. Now, obviously, if I have another one back, let's just back the third favourite as well. The green up all button applies to the whole field. So anything that has an outstanding position sitting on it will be traded out, either for the green or for red. And this button effectively gives you the summation of the two. Clicking on these individual buttons will purely trade out that particular selection. Now, the problem with doing these manually is that it's very easy, particularly if you're doing something in running, to freeze, to hover over that button in the hope that that red figure turns green again. So you end up behaving like a rabbit in headlights. So that's why we really want to implement a stop loss. But let's see how we can implement a stop loss that corresponds to these buttons here. So I'll just pull up the automation tab in the strategy editor. I've got a blank strategy already configured. So there's two rules we have to set up here. There's the green up selections. Now I'm just calling it green up because essentially the process is the same with this particular technique. You're either greening up or you're redding up. And the red up, or the stop loss if you will, is going to be configured by the conditions that we create. So green up selection. Now I'm going to set it to start now, since we're getting on for 3 hours away from the start of this race. So I'll configure it now so that the strategy fires as soon as I assign it. Now the action that we want in this particular case is green up selection. Now, like any other piece of automation within Fairbot, you need to tell Fairbot what runner, what selection the rule is going to act upon. Now in advance, we don't know which ones we're going to bet. So we have to configure our rule to take that into account. So although we have all these options to allow us to identify the runner concerned, if we don't know what it's going to be in advance, we need to select the all option and make sure apply to all is switched on. That setting has been covered loads of times in different videos throughout the channel, so I'll let you browse for those. Now in this particular case, all we're going to do is to specify a stop loss for each runner. So what we want to do is go into the conditions tab, select selection green up P&L, and what we want to do, again, we need to specify the all option, and we then need to specify the green up if our stop loss, let's just say, is less than minus 20. So what that is going to do is it's going to look at the market and it's going to look at any individual runner where there's an outstanding position and the P&L is less than 20. So we need to save that. Okay, and let's just assign that to this race. Okay, so you'll see nothing has happened yet because the market is so far away from starting that there's not much movement. So if I switch back there, you'll also see the conditions column here. We've got a minus 76, which corresponds to that button. we've got a 0, which corresponds to that button, and all the others are not available, or not applicable. That's because we don't have open positions on them. If I switch back to here, well, it doesn't really matter, I can leave that there, and if I, let's say we back Hog's Delight, okay, and you'll see that that immediately went to a minus £28 position, right? And there it's trade out automatically. Now that was quite dramatic in the real world. That's simply because I'm using more money than I should have done, given the market state at the moment. But it was useful to illustrate the point quickly. So this had a negative worse than £20 on it, so it's immediately traded out and stopped any further loss on that runner. These ones haven't hit the negative 20 position yet, so that we're okay. And the other ones, nothing happens to them because there's no back bet on them. Okay, so that's how to set up a stop loss on each individual runner, which you may find useful if you're doing any sort of Dutching and the like. You can do a stop loss on any individual runner and allow the other ones to carry on into profit. Okay, let's have a look at simulating this button here. Now to simulate this green up all, in other words green up across the market, it's actually a bit easier to do. Again, I'll just set it to now. The action is going to be green up all selection. So there's no need to apply to all because this particular action affects everything in the market, or it's more specifically all the open positions in the market. And again, you can do all the usual things like keeping and so on. What we need to do is set our condition, and that is the market green up all position. And we want that to set to less than, well, since we're at 30, let's change that to 32, let's say, or 35, minus 35, because I'll then put in another bet. So that's minus 35, and that's it. Let me just switch that one off so that doesn't trigger again. Click on save. So that hasn't happened, it's at minus 30. If I stick in another bet there just for giggles, okay, and there it greened up automatically because I was then in a negative position. Okay, so as far as simulating the green up buttons are concerned, fairly straightforward using those two types of rules. You can green up selection or green up all across the field. Okay, let's have a look at another method you can use to enter a stop loss. Okay, let me just move to a different market so that we've got a clean slate. You can use a stop loss automatically if you were using the trading functions. So the trading option here allows you to specify an offset, and smart bets, you can switch that on and off as well. And as soon as you have this selected, you then end up having this panel selected as well that allows you to configure a stop loss. So what's actually going to happen there? Let me just switch those off first and I'll just show you the basics. In this particular case, if I was to do a back bet, let's say, it will place an offset bet to trade out at 10 ticks below my entry point. And if I have the stop loss option switched on, it will also place a corresponding lay 10 ticks higher than my back bet entry point, with a view to placing a closing lay at 12 ticks higher than my entry point. So it's actually easier if I show you that on the ladder. Okay, so let's pop in a back bet at 305 on the favourite State of Bliss. Okay, so there's my £100 back bet, which is still to be taken. That's the corresponding offset bet for £100 and the corresponding stop loss bet. And that's all done automatically, and you can configure how far that goes using these two settings here. Now let me just scratch that. One of the things to note also, however, is that if you use smart bets and a trailing stop loss, rather than just using the actual stake value, your figures will be automatically calculated to automatically green you up or red you up, depending on whether it's your offset bet that gets taken or your stop loss bet that gets taken. We'll just let that clear itself. We'll go on over to the next horse to illustrate that point. So again, we're looking for a 10-tick offset, but this time with smart bets, and a stop loss, this time with smart bets and a trailing stop loss. So if I pop in my back bet, you'll see that the offset is now calculated as £110.14 lay stake. In other words, it's going to green up automatically at that point and go across the field. Similarly, the stop loss is calculated as at £86.30 lay bet. And that's all because of the smart bets option that's been switched on in both cases. With the trailing stop loss switched on, once this bet gets matched and it starts to move down this way, that trailing stop loss will follow it. Which means that if there is a reversal before your offset is matched, the stop loss will trigger sooner than originally configured. In other words, it remains 10 ticks away from the position of the market. The other thing to note as well is that when you've got smart bets on, each time it moves, that stake value is recalculated to correspond with a green up of that particular selection. So there's a variety of ways that you can do that. Let me just cancel that out of the way, and you'll notice when I cancel that bet, because it wasn't matched, the stop loss and the offset bets are also cancelled. Now when you use the trading option, it's important to note that it takes its values for its stakes from here, except when you've got smart bets switched on and off. So if I switch those off and change that to 50, notice what happens when I pop in my trade. My offset is set to 50. It's taking its lay stake from there, but it's taking its stop loss from here. Again, let me just cancel that. I'll set that back to 100, but it's also important to note that if you have the stake button panel open, these settings are taken from here. So if I have 20 set, you'll see it's a £20 stake that goes in, and it is adjusted accordingly. But if I have that closed and I put my stake in initially, let me just switch trading on, you'll see that it takes that from here. So the one overrides the other. And later on you'll see a mechanism where that has a potential issue for you. The other thing to note is that this panel here, although it's in the ladder, is also available on the grid. And you can view that by clicking on the settings box and clicking on grid stake buttons. So whenever these stake buttons are displayed, they override the settings here. That's just as an aside. Okay, so you'll see a whole range of different settings that you can specify here. Let's see how we implement that automatically. So once again, let me just open up the strategy editor. We're using this one. I'll switch that rule off and we'll go in and create another. So in this one, we're going to place a trade, and we're going to use, again, I'll just set it to configure straight away. Now, it's important to note that this particular action places your opening bet, and it places your stop loss and your offset. So we'll go ahead and select place a trade. Once again, we have the option where we need to specify which one it is. Now, in this particular case, we need to know in advance which selection we want, or alternatively, we need to control it by specifying conditions. So we can either choose by name, for example, which allows us then to choose from a list. So let's just choose, we'll choose by name, but keep in mind that you may want to use all, and I'll configure that in a minute. So we'll choose by name, and then you'll see that we can specify which runner. Trouble with that is, this rule that we're creating here is useless for any other race. So you might want to instead choose at runtime. Now this is going to be a back delay bet. Let's specify the initial bet odds. Let's just take the best back odds, so those are the current odds. And we'll choose it to be 0 ticks. So it's going to take whatever odds are available at the time. The offset bet is going to be 10 ticks. We can specify it as being smart bets, and the bet size amount we can specify either a fixed amount or a percentage of our bank and so on. So we'll just choose 100 there. And here, when we scroll down, we can then put in our stop loss. So if we configure it similar to the one that we already did, 10 ticks, place at 12 ticks. We can choose smart bets. We can have a trailing stop loss. And of course, we can choose it to keep. We can also configure conditions where we can specify minimum odds, maximum odds, and that type of thing. Let me get back to that to show you the other option. Because in this particular case, this one here will allow us to choose our runner, our selection, from a drop-down box. So let me just click on OK there, and we'll save that. And so now, if I go to a different market and assign this, we now have this control here. So I can now click on there, choose whatever runner I want, Persian Wolf. There's my bet going in, and there's my stop loss and my offset. Okay? An alternative way of doing that, if I again switch back to the strategy editor and we edit this and change it to, sorry, where am I? Choose the selection, set it to all, and choose apply to all, and then go to conditions and choose selection fixed odds, and then choose all here. I'm going to choose best backs odds. Let's say that they must be greater than 10. So we should end up with bets on the bottom half of this market. So this is going to get assigned to all of them. So when I save this, it's going to get implemented in this. So I'll switch to a different market to let you see it in action. Okay, you see how that got configured as soon as I assigned it. Let me just switch back to here. If I, right, we should only get a bet on the very last one here. Oh, last two has just changed. Oh, it was greater than 10, wasn't it? Yeah. So we've got 2 bets going in. If we switch to my bets, you'll see that we've got the stop losses, and that's a trailing stop loss. So that's where the T comes from. And those are our 2 offsets. Okay, so by utilizing the place a trade action, you can essentially simulate this stuff up here. So there's one other way that you can apply a stop loss, which we'll look at just now. So I'll just switch to the next race just to give us a clean slate again. One of the things that you can do, and again it's probably easier to show you via the ladder, is you can manually create a stop loss simply by clicking on the ladder or the grid. So for example, if I place a bet in here, so we've stuck £100 on Gigantstown King, I can now place a stop loss by right clicking on the opposite side of the market. So I can place a stop loss up here just by right clicking, and there goes my SSL, single stop loss. Now it's important to recognise that that stop loss takes its stake from there. If I clear that away and change that figure to 50, let's say, and right click on that side, that's my trailing stop loss, even though my opening stake is 100. Now that can be useful in a way because you can pop in multiple stop losses. So you might want to use that as a mechanism to start limiting your liability if the market is getting away with you, but at the same time leave some money in the market just in case the market reverses and starts heading in the other direction. Trouble is, if this one here gets taken, the break-even point will essentially move down a bit. So it's further away from you for the money that you've got in the market still. But as I say, that might be a strategy that you might be able to implement. The other thing worth pointing out again is the stake buttons here. They override that. So when I place a stop loss in here and right click, you'll see it's taken that value there. And I can do any number of those to enter stop losses of small amounts. The other thing that's worthwhile pointing out, let me just say that we've got £5 stakes. If I enter the market again and pop in a few £5 bets, you'll see that my total stake on this runner is 120, and that's reflected on this button here. So if I now select that, and I can right click, and my stop loss is now equivalent to my net position on that particular runner. And that can be useful if, for example, you go into the market and not all of your initial stake is taken. That button there will reflect the matched amount on that runner. So that might be worthwhile considering as well. So that's another way that you can set up a stop loss quickly, simply by manually clicking. And you can also, you won't be surprised to learn, use automation to insert a single stop loss as well. So if we clear that away and go back to the automation side of things, and the strategy editor, let me again just switch that one off and disable it so we can create another one. So this time we're going to enter a rule, and this one we're going to do place a single stop loss. So again, I'll leave it set to now so that it configures and executes immediately, and place a single stop loss. Usual thing, you need to specify which option that you're going to put the stop loss on. So this case we're going to do, again we'll do it at runtimes, make the selection, and we then now have to specify the trigger odds in the same way as we did up here. So this is actually different from doing the manual thing in that there's no such thing as a trigger odds as such. It's wherever you specify it, wherever you right click on the ladder or the grid. So let's specify trigger odds. Now you don't want fixed odds because you don't know what your position is initially. So what we're going to do is use the matched back bets odds, and we're going to specify it as being plus 10 ticks, and the bet odds are going to be the same thing, plus 12 ticks. The reason for making them slightly different is to make sure the actual stop loss gets matched, because the market may actually be moving fairly quickly. So you might have to adjust the gap between the trigger point and the actual bet placement. Fixed amount, And again, this is where it tends to get limited. You have to know what the amount is. I would tend to suggest if you're using a set stake size, let's say £100 in this case, set that to a smaller amount, and then just have it loop round a number of times. So it puts in lots of stop losses, and that way potentially you can handle different back stakes. And that's the other thing to know is we're going to use this to do a back bet or cover a back bet. So this has to be a lay bet or a lay stop loss. And again, you can use keep the ticket in running and so on, and you need to specify the bet amount. We'll do a fixed amount. Let's just do 100 since we're backing at 100, and click on OK. Again, you may want to have conditions in there. So choose OK for that. Save that. And here we've got unknown. I'll just leave the ladder up so we should see the position going in, hopefully. And that's on Jigginstown King. There we are. It appears where we right click. I must admit, I have never used this particular action in automation. I much prefer just greening up, either for the market or individually. That's my preferred option rather than jigging about, excuse the pun, jigging about with the single stop loss. But there you have it. That's essentially the 3 ways you can specify a stop loss manually and the corresponding automated version. So have a play with those and see how you get on. Thanks for watching.